Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Tragedy. I am joined by my one amazing co-host and peers. But anyway, so we got Angel Medina, the
Wow.
Kingpin, the King of the Streets, the ECW original, here
Marty,
with
thanks
us,
for the bits.
Thanks
and
for that bit, Marty.
we have Piers Austin, who is a amazing co-host of the show. He's also the host of Shooting the Shit Uncensored, where you can find that is on MWA Multi-Continental Wrestling Alliance on YouTube. Make sure you check us out on all of our platforms. But the biggest platform of all, huge shout out, huge thank you to Vince Russo in putting our show on the Vince Russo Network. Guys, if you're watching this on Wrestling with Tragedy's YouTube page, first off, go and hit that subscribe button and hit that bell to stay notified. If you're watching this on the Facebook channel, if you're watching it on some other random channel, guys, do us a quick favor. It'll take you 2 seconds. It'll mean the world to us. Go to youtube.com, type in the Vince Russo Network, and give a like and maybe even a share or even a comment on a Wrestling with Tragedy episode. Let Vince Russo know that Wrestling with Tragedy does come with a very loyal and strong fan base. With that being said, let's show some love to our amazing sponsors and try to pay some fucking bills, guys. So
money.
My On Belts is the premier belt maker in the world. If you're looking to start your belt collection, or in my case, add to your belt collection, make sure you hit up Eddie and Ira Williams. If you go to Wrestling Review Society,
If you go to Wrestling Review
on
Society,
Facebook, look for
sorry, you just
What?
cut out there. I was just helping you out.
Stay in your lane, Piers. Anyway, Multi-Continental Wrestling Alliance on Facebook, and look for Eddie and Ira Williams. Hit them up. You can even look in My On Belts on Facebook. You can find them anywhere, and if you can't find them, just message myself, Piers, or Angel, and we'll point you in the right direction. Eddie and Ira Williams have an amazing payment plan, as low as $20 a paycheck until the belt is paid off, and you are going to get the best possible belt at the lowest possible price. Also, guys, A-Rock Designs. A-Rock Designs is a custom business where she makes all those cool wrestling cups you see floating around, like the one Pierce has on his screen right now. A beautiful CM Punk tumbler. We do hats, shirts, keychains, hoodies, and our most popular seller is the cups. So if you want to get your hands on any merchandise, wrestling or non-wrestling related, make sure you hit up A-Rock Designs on Facebook. With that being said, guys, we are in session with our next case. We are going to be covering a very touchy subject for many, many reasons.
Hey, before you go into that, I just want to tell the fans that's one thing is that we're having a little tiny bit of technical difficulties. If you notice anything out of the ordinary, please, we're getting that resolved. So I don't know, did something happened with our internet? So
I already banged the gavel.
It's fine.
No, but I did the thing and I said the words and I was on. You're just as bad as Piers. Every time I get going, every time I get a little bit of steam behind me, every time I start to feel the groove, I wake up at friggin' 5 o'clock in the morning to do this stuff with you guys, and I get no appreciation. Every time I go to get on a roll here, you guys screw me over. So be quiet. Let me try this again. We are in session, and we're going to be covering a very touchy subject for very many reasons. One of the biggest things we see in pro wrestling, not with Angel, as he so clearly reminds us every time, there's very heavy drug use in the world of professional wrestling. This drug and alcohol use leads to very huge problems down the line, whether it be mental, physical, whatever the case may be. This topic is going to have a little bit of both. If you guys haven't figured it out by reading the title, or even if you know where we're going with this, we're talking about none other than the Dynamite Kid, who had his own struggles with drugs, alcohol. He was a very abusive person to his wife, to his children, and it ultimately led to, him not being able to see his kids ever again. So I want to give Piers and Angel a chance to give their opening thoughts, and then we'll just get right on into it. So, Piers, let's go to you, man.
Thanks, Kevin. And by the way, I was only trying to help you out at the beginning, mate. No need to get your panties in a
already
bunch.
banged the gavel.
All right, settle down, princess. Fucking don't get your tits twisted.
Titty twister.
Nibble cribble. So, guys,
in all honesty, guys, there's not two other people on the face of this planet I'd rather do this show with.
Absolutely. But so getting into it, so Tom Billington, aka the Dynamite Kid, he was a smaller guy in the pro wrestling world at the time. Okay, so he was about 5'6", 5'7". Back in the days when the world of pro wrestlers, everyone was 6'6", 6'8", 230, 250, 300 pounds. So, he was competing to get at a very high level, and he was competing to be a top earner in the world of professional wrestling. So he did what he thought he needed to do, and he took steroids to obviously get himself bigger, started working in overdrive. In saying that as well, being on the road every single day, putting his body on the line and wrestling in a very aggressive, very physical style, took its toll on his body. He then started self-medicating with drugs and alcohol. You also mentioned that he was an abusive person, but he was also a very aggressive person backstage. There's numerous stories of him getting into physical altercations. I believe one was with the Mounties at one stage, where he basically just beat the fuck out of one of them. And obviously, which ultimately led to his wife giving him a one-way ticket back to the UK, basically saying, "Mate, get the fuck out." And also just a little bit of insight as well. He was actually married to Bret Hart's ex-wife. He was married to Bret Hart's ex-wife's cousin, sorry. So there was a connection there to the Hart family as well, with him and the cousin of Bret Hart's ex-wife. But Angel, I'm going to throw it down to you, man.
Well, just before Angel gets into that, because I don't want to cut him off. Are we going to sit here and pretend that Piers isn't wearing a shirt with his own face on it? You freaking mark. But in all honesty, it is a pretty good looking shirt. Piers, if anybody wants to get their hands on shirts like that, where can they find them at?
You can find them at prowrestlingtees.com at prowrestlingtees.com/MWA World or prowrestlingtees.com/Wrestling Review Society. We will have our own Pro Wrestling Tees store up in the next couple of weeks, guys. So stay tuned for that, and you will definitely be seeing
hard times,
daddy.
Now, to let the fans know, I know you guys are concerned out there that if they make them for full-grown people, absolutely. If you go to the Wrestling Tee store, they do have shirts for full-grown adults. I know
the Wrestling Tee Shore, or did you say store? Okay,
store.
You want to come over for supper?
But
so
anyway,
now that we got that out of the way, Angel, your thoughts on Dynamite Kid?
Well, Tom Billington was a phenomenal wrestler. He started his pro wrestling career under the tutelage of Ted Bentley, known as Dr. Death. He was from a family of boxers that were very aggressive people. They were, into the fisticuffs, and it was not surprised that he got into the pro wrestling business. Now, he was an innovator. He was a hybrid wrestler because he was doing things that nobody's ever done. They never seen anything like him before, especially at his stature. Like you said, he was a tiny guy. Of course, he was on the gas. He was phenomenal. And, just people were in awe because of the things he was doing in the ring. And that's who he inspired, like guys like wrestlers, but the main wrestler he inspired is, Chris Benoit, of course, because he kind of mirrored that type of style from the Dynamite Kid. So again, we're going to talk about Dynamite Kid and how he, from his rise to fame, he had a bad attitude. He had a lot of heat with a lot of the boys, but they couldn't take away his wrestling ability, meaning that he was an awesome wrestler. He was just supposed to be a dick. Never met the guy. So, let's go from there.
So we bring up we bring up a lot of things with the Dynamite Kid, and
okay.
One of the abuse before we get into his actual. Were you making a funny?
No.
Oh, so anyway, before we get into his actual career, Angel, how much does drugs and alcohol influence a locker room like a major wrestling company? How often do you see drug and alcohol abuse and stuff like that within pro wrestling? And I only ask you because you were actually in the business. I know you had a very unmemorable career and all, but you actually were in ECW. But I joke, Angel.
Wow.
I'm just joking. But no, seriously, you were involved in a lot of great storylines in ECW. You had a fantastic run in ECW. You've been in pro wrestling for the last, what, 20, 30 years? How prevalent is drugs and alcohol when it comes to pro wrestling?
Now, I don't know about now, but back then it was just normal. It was drugs and alcohol was the constant norm in the locker room because we're wrestling in pain. You know, we're trying to numb our senses, trying to get the courage to do the things that we do in the ring. I'm not saying everybody was doing it. I wasn't doing it. You know, but it's not even ECW. It was just all around pro wrestling and all the stories that I heard that everybody was doing cocaine, you know, marijuana, whatever. But you know, pills. You know, just a lot of drugs that were going around just to keep going because you had to wrestle hurt. You was too afraid to not say I can't do it today because you're afraid to lose your spot. So the only way for you to push yourself forward is either from alcohol or drugs. Yeah, so it was very well known in the locker rooms.
So just a few facts about the Dynamite Kid. So in the mid to late 80s, he wrestled for New Japan Pro Wrestling. He wrestled for obviously the WWF. He was one half of the legendary British Bulldogs. As you guys said, his real name was Thomas Billington. He was born the 5th of December, 1958, and he died the 5th of December, 2018. He died on his 60th birthday. He was the father of 3 children, and he was trained by, as you said, Dr. Death. He was trained by Ted Bentley, Jack Fallon, Billy Riley, John Foley, and Stu Hart.
Now, you know, he started his pro wrestling career, his pro debut when he was 17 years old. And apparently Bruce Hart was the one that discovered him to convince his dad to bring him into Stampede Wrestling.
So, I mean, from all accounts, you know, everything he's done and being part of the British Bulldogs. And one other thing that I wanted to look at was with his championship history. He was a WWF Junior Heavyweight Champion. PWI even ranked him as number 5 on their top 100 tag teams in 2003. They also ranked him as number 41 on their top 500 in singles. So he was no slum. This wasn't some guy barely making it. He was a very talented person, and by all accounts had a rocket strapped to his back. And this is a perfect example of what drugs and alcohol will do to even the best of us.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was one story that, you know, the same guy that brought him in, Bruce Hart, they had an argument, and literally Dynamite Kid broke his jaw, like literally, not saying before the wedding, but like around the time of the wedding of Owen Hart. And I want to know what the argument was about, but they just said it was just a verbal argument that he just broke his jaw.
But was that leading from like obviously roid rage, or because obviously by the sound of
no,
you know, I know I've seen interviews with Tom Billington, the Dynamite Kid, and he just seems like an aggressive guy naturally.
No, yeah,
like,
and that's what I'm saying.
Like very hard. He sounds like a hard prick.
Hard times,
hard times, daddy. But no, he
just,
does. He seems like very.
Now, let me explain something to you about about steroids, and I'm not going into this topic like to ramble off. But the thing is, I mean, I know Pierce, you don't use steroids because you can tell by your physique. But anyway, the thing is that
oh, what's this? I can see both of you drank your fucking haterade this morning, dickhead.
But like that's what I'm saying. If you're a dick off the gas, you're gonna be a dick on the gas. It's just amplifying who you are. So it's not. I don't think the roid rage. It just amped him up, but I don't know if he was on the gas during that time when he broke his jaw. But again, it depends. Yeah, it was during the time when Owen Hart got married, so he was probably still swole. So yeah, it probably was a factor that he's just losing his temper in regards to, you know, what conversation he had with Bruce Hart, which I don't know what they're talking about that set him off.
But you know, you look at him from a from a standpoint of like, you know, I know I've seen an interview series about his family, and you know, it was basically a Chris Benoit documentary. And obviously, as we mentioned earlier, Chris Benoit was a huge fan of Dynamite Kid, and you could see that from his in-ring style. That was very similar to Dynamite Kid, from the flying headbutt to the submission to the way that he moved in the ring. But one of the things I found interesting in this documentary was his ex-wife talking about how violent he was, that at one stage he pulled out a shotgun and put it to her head. Like, you know what I mean? Like, to put a gun to your wife's head, the mother of your children,
And
then,
wasn't his argument that it wasn't loaded? Like, wasn't
Dude,
that his best defense?
Dude, that's what he said in the documentary, and this was like 20 years like past the fucking fact, dude. So, and like you think as an older man who was like in a wheelchair, completely crippled, and they mentioned, "Oh, did you put a shotgun to your wife's head?" And then her response is, his response is, "Yeah, but it wasn't loaded." Loaded or not, that's still pretty fucked up to do to anyone. Just to scare. Like, yes, yeah, I just did it to scare her, motherfucker. That would scare the shit out of everyone.
And it doesn't.
Anyone.
And you got to remember, just because it's not loaded, she didn't know it was loaded. So the thing was, if they do question her and say, "Were you in fear of your life? Did you feel you were going to die?" That's all you need to charge somebody. I mean, even if you pulled the gun, but she didn't know it was loaded, so it doesn't matter if that was his defense.
I'll even go one step further, Angel. You being prior law enforcement, me being current law enforcement. If you sat there, and I'm just trying to find something really quick. But if you sat there and you walked up to somebody and you had your hand under your shirt like this, you're like, "This is a gun. I can kill you." And you honestly believe that this is a gun and you are in fear of your life, you have the right to use deadly force.
Yeah.
So the fact that the gun is, and I know that seemed a little far off in the left field, but the fact that the gun wasn't loaded means absolutely nothing. If she sat there and said she was in fear of her life, that is enough to try somebody at a minimum. You've got ag assault. Angel, I got props too.
and that's the thing. It definitely is. It's aggravated assault, and it's to put someone in that situation and to put the mother of your children in that situation. You got to have some serious fucking mental issues to do that. Let's face it. I mean, we all have arguments with our wives and our partners, but would it really lead to the point of you putting a gun to her head? I don't know, man. A normal person with a normal mindset, I don't see that happening. You know what I mean? Like,
I don't know. I got that big old water gun from Walmart, and I soaked Ashley with it, son.
Super soaker.
I don't know now, but no, I get your point. You're absolutely right. That is the mother of my children. That is the woman that I stood before my family, her family, and I stood before God, and I said, "I promise to love this woman for the rest of my life and do absolutely everything I can to protect her." And then turn around and be the one that causes her the most harm. It's fucking insane.
Well, dude, apparently the abuse was so bad that he put his old lady in, or his wife and his children in, but mainly his wife. The abuse, physical, the mental. She actually stated in this documentary that she sat her children down on the bed, got a gun, and was prepared to kill both of her children, then turn that firearm on herself. Now, the only and she said in this documentary, the only reason she did not do that was because she couldn't guarantee that all of them would die. And to put someone to that, dude, like that's like, you know what I mean? Like hearing that as a parent, as a human being, like put aside the parenting, as a human being, to hear someone saying that that's their only thought, that was their only way to escape that. Dude, that was heavy, man. I had to pause it and walk away.
And what year was this?
This would have been post the Chris Benoit death, so it would have been 2006, 2007. This documentary.
Okay. I didn't want to cut you off, Piers, much like you do me every time I start talking. But anyway, I didn't want to cut you off. But for everybody watching, look, every single one of us on this screen is a father. We all have children. Let that sink in for just 1 second. You sit your children down. You are prepared to kill them with a gun and then turn around and kill yourself with that same gun. And the only reason you didn't do it is because you couldn't guarantee that all three of you would die.
Bro.
That's some heavy shit.
Yeah.
Bro, fuck. That's beyond heavy, bro. Like, that's some fucking, like I said, I had to pause it and walk away from it just to digest that shit. And I'm not kidding you, bro. Like, I was like, what the like, I was trying to think, what the fuck did this woman go through that her mind went to that stage, to that level?
Well, I mean, there was very much documented physical abuse between the two. Like, that's no secret.
Yeah, physical, mental.
It was, yeah, and there are times where you'll have mental abuse without physical abuse. But if you have physical abuse, you always have mental abuse. And if you are sitting there and everybody knows the physical abuse between the couple, you can only imagine the mental abuse that she has to go through. And I am a very big anti-suicide. I don't support it. I don't agree with it, anything like that. So in me saying that, I don't ever think it's okay to take your own life or even a child's life. But we're not talking about a stranger here. We're talking about the children's mother, the one person on the face of the planet who is supposed to protect them. And she felt the only way to protect them was to end their life so they would never have to deal with him again. Can you imagine? Like I said, we know the physical abuse. Can you imagine the mental abuse this woman had to go through and for how long she had to go through it?
It's mind-boggling, and it's almost he broke this woman. You know what I mean? Like he mentally fucking destroyed her to the point.
And how many years they've been married? Prior to their divorce.
I will tell you in just a second.
I think it was like 10 or so years. I think they married in the
while Kevin's doing that.
So it says right here that they were married from now. It says that they were married from 1982 to 91, so about 9 years.
So 9 years of mental abuse. I mean, that is the most hardest situation that anybody could go through, regardless if it's 9, 10, 5. I mean, picture constantly being abused mentally, physically.
But that's just their marriage. Imagine how long they were together before that.
Yeah, dating and stuff like that. And the thing is that with domestic violence is hard because there's a lot of programs out there that definitely can help you and get you into a safer environment. But when you have somebody like that really abusing you, it's hard to leave them. It's just really hard because they're afraid that this person is either going to come after them, harm their family. It just, regardless of the fact that Dynamite is one of my wrestling heroes. Like I said, I separate the two entities from the hero to the monster. I mean, I think he was just a horrible person and a monster who treats his wife to that extreme to make her consider herself to kill her kids and herself. That is just a level beyond that I can just fathom.
And you mentioned, Angel, like there's obviously organizations that can protect people now in 2020 and beyond. But we look at that time frame of 1982 to 1991, which is like there wasn't that much out there at the time even then he was a high profile person.
Do you guys think the reason he resorted to so much of this mental abuse and physical abuse was due to the fact that he was a very poorly educated man? It's been no secret. He grew up, he was the son of a coal miner. His father worked in the coal mines. His academics were not a priority in his household. He was actually planning to go work in the coal mine with his father, as we know throughout history.
I thought he was the son of a plumber.
Jesus Christ, Angel.
Wrong hard times.
Oh.
But as we know, going to work throughout history, coal miners tend to drop out of high school to go straight to work, provide for the families. These are hardworking families. His academics were not a priority to him or his father. And it was actually through going to wrestling shows where he caught the attention of his trainer. And from that point on, when he caught the attention of his original trainer, is when he started deviating from the coal mining plan and start training into being a pro wrestler. Had he have never caught the attention, had he have never went to those pro wrestling shows, he very much would have ended up like his father, working in a coal mine. And the only reason I bring this up is I know it. I'll be honest. My wife is a lot smarter than me. Just hands down, it is what it is. When her and I are in a conversation, I've never laid my hands on my wife, and I don't call my wife outside of her name. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is when her and I get into when we start debating each other and she starts just saying things and I have nothing to come back at her with, I get extremely frustrated. Not at myself because I'm not smart enough to argue with her. Do you think a lot of this stuff happened because he was such a poorly educated man?
That could be a possibility. I mean, again, she probably was saying things that off the cuff, very like I said, he's not quick witted and not quick on the draw. And yeah, I could believe so that his education it was a factor in regards to arguments and stuff like that.
But
Well, Angel, you know as well as I do when it comes to in Piers. I'm sorry, I just want to make this last point.
Yeah.
You know as well as I do, Angel, in law enforcement, and I see it every day. I'm sure you've seen it all the time when we deal with these domestic violence. When we deal with like domestic violence and stuff like that, it ranges across all facets of life, every tax bracket, every demographic, every skin color, everything. You see it everywhere.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest reoccurring factors is lower educated, lower income housing. Correct?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So when we see things like this happen in everyday life, that's why I bring that up, is because I see it all the time. Like, yes, I've arrested doctors for abusing their wives or husbands or partners or whatever the case may be. So education isn't the only factor, but more times than not, if I were to start a tally right now and I looked at the next 20 arrests I made for domestic violence alone, out of those 20, I guarantee you about 14 to 16 of those arrests will be one of the partners was poorly educated because they want to argue. They want to come back with these arguments. They want to verbally win, but they can't. And what's the next thing they do?
Physical.
Well, I can't shut you down with my words, so I'm going to make you shut up.
And
That's
I want to
piggyback. I bring that up.
I want to piggyback off that. I mean, the thing is about domestic violence. Let me tell you a story. And Pierce, this is something I just wanted to say. Yeah, there's a lot of programs out there. There's a lot of things that can help you in domestic violence situations, but those are not bulletproof vests. They don't protect you. The reason I'm bringing this up is 2 years ago there was an incident where this couple, she was abused. Just the same thing like the Dynamite kid story. He was abusive. He was mentally abusive. He was just beating on her. He was going to court. They had a PFA on him. That's a protection from abuse order. They had everything on this guy. So one day she was going to work. And he followed her. And as soon as she stopped at the light, boom, he blew her brains out. And the car went into the ditch, and he followed her in the ditch, and he blew his brains out. So the thing is that, like I said, there's a lot, and they left like I think 4 or 5 kids without a parent. Both parents are gone now. But that's what I'm saying. It's just that, the education, it's the environment. I heard he was a piece of shit. He grew up in a poor neighborhood. He was not a very smart guy. I'm not saying he was stupid. He just didn't have the education, and maybe she was smarter than him. Like you said, Kevin, if she's throwing out those, like, hey, bam, 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 making those statements, making those, like, hey, you're a loser, whatever she's saying, that he's like, he couldn't come back fast enough to
using words that he didn't understand.
Yeah. And he just beat the shit out of her. Again, I don't know the whole story. I just know that the only thing he can do is, since he couldn't have his wife, killed her right there at the stoplight. And that's the thing. It's just the environment that he grew up in.
Like I said, the education factor isn't the only factor, but we see it a lot of the time.
And I think it could come down to the intelligence side of things, like he just wasn't that smart. But, 9 years is a long time. And to say that she couldn't have had opportunities to escape before 9 years, you look at the schedule of a pro wrestler from 1982 to 1991. Like on that level, like how many days a month would they be home? One.
Well, here's the thing.
I got something too after you're done.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Angel.
Okay, let me tell you a quick story after ECW. This is my ex-wife. And it's not hard. It's just I'm trying to put the story together. We were arguing, right? And in the wrestling world, I'm somebody. Oh, Angel, you're great. You're wonderful. I always thought of you, as a hero. And so, I was put on a pedestal. As soon as I got home, right? We used to get into arguments, and she'd be like, "Oh, just knocking me. And then you go, hey, everybody treats me good. I used to be a world famous wrestler. I used to be." And she goes, "That's right. Used to be a great wrestler. Used to be and the fire that she used to set in me, that I just wanted to snap her. The true story. The anger that I had because she knew the words to say. She knew my trigger points. She knew what she knew me mentally, what would trigger me. And that's the thing. She knew, like, you used to be a great wrestler. You used to be somebody. And I used to be like, bro, that knocked me down like shit. And the heat and the anger that I got, nothing physical happened, but I can understand the emotion that you just, the only thing you can do to retaliate is just these. That's the first thing that popped in. I just want to knock you out, which I don't condone. It's just, that's the feeling I had. Because that's the only defense I had, because my words weren't strong enough. The only thing that was strong enough was my fist. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You wanted to have that ultimate.
But nothing happened. It's just I was like the guy from Family Guy.
Well, you know, that's the line that separates it. You know, I mean, look, I don't condone abuse of any kind. But
None.
who hasn't what man out there, and I challenge anybody watching, leave a comment. Nobody's going to judge you. But how many men out there haven't said, "You're lucky you're a female," or "I wish you were a man," or something like that? We've all had those thoughts. We don't act on them because we are men and we're reasonable human beings. But anyway, we've all been in that situation. But what I was going to say with Piers was, he brings up how hard was it for her to leave with the schedule of a pro wrestler in the late to mid 80s. They were married in 82 all the way to 91. So, yeah, the territory days are thriving. They're booming. You hear all the time the strenuous work schedule, the time on the road. But you have a little thing called Stockholm Syndrome. And you have this thing called sense of dependency. Yeah. Now, I understand she wants to take care of her kids. She wants to provide a better life. But much like we were talking about with the, what was it? The Speak Out movement. I believe that's what we were talking about. When you develop a sense of dependency on somebody, and this is something else I'm sure all of us have seen, even you, Piers, you're not law enforcement, but you do deal with a lot with risk and safety management. I'm sure you deal with this a lot as well. When somebody develops a sense of dependency on them, that is the hardest drug to break. You could be addicted to heroin, hillbilly heroin, meth, whatever, alcohol, pills, it does not matter. You can break that a lot faster than you could break somebody's sense of dependency. And if she thought he was her only way to survive, well, if I let him whip my ass every once in a while, and not in the good way, me and the kids will get to eat. We'll have a roof over our head. I can only speak on the situations that I have dealt with in law enforcement. I can't speak for her mindset, but 9 times out of 10, what I normally see is when it comes to a woman who has children with an abusive male partner, the thing they think of is, I'm going to let him beat on me because I can't provide for my kids, but he can. So I will take that abuse so my children have a better life. And it never works, ever, because sooner or later that abuse trickles down over into the children, and that's where they have their final straw when they should have pulled the plug a long time ago.
And also, Kevin, you got to look at it from the perspective, and I know you know, and it depends on the control. Does he control the bank account? Does he control the keys of the house, the car? Maybe she didn't have any money to leave. You know, so you got to have money to leave. You have to have something to feed those kids when you're.
There was a case I worked on not too long ago. There was a case I was on not too long ago where every time the man went to work, the woman and the wife and the daughter, who was, I want to say 4.5 years old at the time, they were given rations, meals, and they were locked in a closet until he got home from work.
Get the fuck out of here.
The closet locked from the outside. The mother and the child, they were given like an iPad or something, an extension cord fed through the bottom of the door. They were locked in the closet, and they were not let out until he came back from work. So there could be, and I'm not saying he was that bad off, but it happens every single day. So like Angel said, who knows just how controlling he really was, whether it was bank accounts, whether it was cars, whether it was the home, whether it was her physical movement. How far was she able to go? Who knows?
The thing is, it came down to, and in this documentary that I'm referring to, the ex-wife of Dynamite Kid said it came down to she bought him a one-way ticket back to the UK. back to England. And he
Yeah,
and basically said, "Get the fuck out of here, sunshine. You and your hillbilly heroin."
And the thing is,
so I don't want to butcher her. I don't want to butcher her last name, but it says here in 1991, his divorce from his first wife, Michelle Samadu, Samadu, was finalized in 1991. With whom Thomas Billington shared one son and two daughters. Following the end of the marriage with Michelle, he moved from Canada back to the UK. And from every report that I've seen, that was the last time he saw his kids in 1991. So from 91 to 2018 when he died, I believe it was 18.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, 2018.
And the thing about it is that you got to look at it from his perspective too. I mean, he grew up in an environment where his dad was a boxer, his uncle was a boxer, his grandfather was a bare knuckle boxer. Coal, Kevin saying coal mining. I mean, this is a rough, and I'm not saying rough family. I'm saying like a man's family. I bet you he was getting knocked across the head all the time, like be a man, slap. It was more physical than mental. Like not mental, like intellectual.
He even stated that he did get it was a very abusive household that he grew up in. He stated that it was a very full on, very aggressive, very violent place.
When you grow up around that, just to piggyback off of what Angel said, when you grow up around that, and much like what Pierce said, he grew up in a very abusive household. But when you grow up, and I'm not knocking, there are world famous boxers, world famous UFC fighters, world famous wrestlers who do this shit for a living and have a great family life. Look at The Rock. The Rock is a great wrestler. He's involved with a huge wrestling family, has nothing but love for his wife and daughter. You've never heard a bad thing said about the man. So just because you're in this physical job profession doesn't mean you're going to be a bad person. But what I'm getting at is when you grow up around boxers and wrestlers and fighters, and the answer to all the problems is, hey, let's step out into the backyard, we'll settle this. When you grow up and that is embedded in your mind, and that's the only way you know to solve your problems. And then, like I said earlier, you take into the account that he was a very poorly educated man. He knew wrestling, but wrestling's great when the bell rings, but what do you do after the bell's done? You find yourself in an argument with your significant other. You don't have the vocabulary to go back and forth with her or with him, because we see this happen with females a lot as well. You don't have the vocabulary to go back and forth, but you've grown up around this physical environment, this hard-nosed, smash-mouth environment where everything is settled through violence and through physicality. It was the only thing he knew, and I'm not trying to justify anything he did at all, but I do believe that you have to look at the parents in this situation. That's why me and my wife, when me and my wife get into an argument, we do not do it around our children. We do not. We never, we've never had a physical altercation. We never will have a physical altercation. But me and my wife, we do have verbal arguments from time to time.
Is healthy.
Exactly. And we always work it out. We never go to bed angry at each other, and we always come to some kind of resolution, which involves one of us apologizing, and we're always better on the back end of it. But the point I'm trying to make is we never do it around the children. Because if your child grows up and that's all they see, if they see me just smacking the crap out of my wife every day, I have 4 sons. All 4 of them are going to grow up to think that's how you settle it. That's okay. That's what daddy did. So that's what I need to do. So by me being a piece of shit human being, I've just raised 4 children into thinking it's okay to grow up to be a piece of shit human being.
Yeah. Now, it's funny. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I just want to say, and that's the thing. As a parent, you're put in a situation where you've given this young life. You can either teach it full of love, respect, and good values, or you're going to teach it other things like hatred, violence, destruction. And Kevin, you mentioned having 4 boys. Angel, you've got a teenage daughter. I've got a son and a daughter myself. And the thing is, as well, looking at it from that way, I've never verbally assaulted my wife. I've had physically assaulted my wife. We've had arguments and that sort of stuff, but we've never done it around the children. But the thing is, as well, if my son saw that's how, as you said, Kevin, that's how you treat a woman or my daughter thinks that's acceptable behavior. No fucking way in the world I want my children to think that.
But
Yeah,
the
you two have an issue bigger than me, or not bigger than me, but you guys have a different issue to face. If you guys were to do that, Angel, you have a daughter, Piers, you have a daughter. If you guys were to do that to their mother, now they grow up thinking it's okay for their husband, their boyfriends to do it to them. So by practicing that behavior, you're teaching your daughters like, hey, it's okay if he slaps me around a little bit. Angel, go ahead. I'm sorry for cutting you off.
No, you're fine. But the problem is with today's society in regards to domestic violence, this is the only sad part that it's kind of a little bit one-sided. In regards to men, a lot of men don't look for help. The reason why they don't look for help is because, Kevin, look at us, me and you, and Pierce as well. You know how many times as a cop, we show up on a scene. You never see a guy call like your stature or my stature call, my wife's hitting me. What's the first thing guys, they look at you and go, let's use Ashley, for example. You and Ashley, and you call the police, and the cops show up, and they go, "Hey, what's going on?"
So just really to put it into perspective, I'm 6'5", 285 pounds. My wife is like 5'3", maybe 110 pounds. So just wanted to put that in perspective for the story.
Yeah. So the thing is that they come in and you say, my wife's hitting me, she's belittling me, she's talking down to me, I'm in tears. How many times have you heard like, you can't control your woman? You can't control your woman, And the thing is, a lot of men don't want to be put in that embarrassment. Like, I can't handle my shit at home. So the only thing they can do is do physical violence because they feel embarrassed to call the police because it puts their man status to a lower level because they're going to because I looked at it. When I showed up on scene, I used to look at people and look at their wife and look at him and go, and you can see in my face, like, really, dude? And that's my fault. But it's the thing in my mind, like, you can't control your woman. So what does the man say? I'm not going to call the cops because that's an embarrassment to me, and it pulls my man card. So the only way I can handle the situation is slap her around because I can't ask for help because it lowers my level as a man.
Let me ask you this, Angel. How many times have you gone to a 911 call? Because I'm guilty of it too, 100% guilty of it. And I've taken sensitivity training to try to stop this from happening in the future. But how many times have you gotten a call, dispatch to whatever your badge number was? We got a call at 123 North Drive Lane. A domestic violence incident has occurred. Victim has asked for police response. Automatically in my head, when that call comes out, man hit a woman. Yep. Automatically. You get to the scene and it's woman hit a man. And now you're kind of on the way over, you're running through all the questions you're going to ask. You're running through the possible outcomes of this. You're running through how are you going to you're a mouse in the maze. How are you going to get to the cheese? How are you going to solve this? And then you show up on scene and you realize everything you've been preparing for, it's flipped. So now you show up to the scene, instead of looking like you were in control and like you have a solution, you're like, wow, wasn't expecting this one. And it does nothing for the situation.
Correct. But with with Dynamite Kid's story, I mean, like I said, it was a spiral. I mean, like I said, it was just, and it didn't stop in his household. It went into the wrestling world as well. He had a lot of heat with a lot of professional wrestlers. That's why he got his teeth knocked out by the Russo brothers. And I'm not saying the Russo brothers was not at fault, because I heard stories about them too. They were pretty badass too. But he was coming around the corner, and I heard Pat Patterson knew that this was going to happen when he came around the corner. And I think it was Jacques who punched him in the mouth. Jacques Rougeau punched in the mouth, and
let's face it. If he was hanging out with Pat Patterson, is it any wonder he got a little butt hurt?
There you go. The cream team. Hashtag cream team. Wrestling T-shirt.
No. Now that's hard times, ladies and gentlemen.
Pat Patterson.
But again, like I said, I am not condoning what Dynamite Kid done. We're just trying to figure out his thought pattern and how this transpired. And
I'm not one of those guys that sit here and goes, it's this person's fault, it's that person's fault, it's this person's fault. I've never said this, but I grew my mother, no. But I grew up around members of my family being abused. I've been around woman beaters and stuff like that. I've never laid a hand on my wife. So you can have all these factors and still not submit to your stereotype or submit to that kind of behavior. But I would be remiss if I didn't say, ultimately the fault is on him because he chose to embrace that kind of behavior. However, we do kind of have to look at his upbringing, the environment he was in, what he was taught to be okay, what he was taught not to be okay. Now, don't get me wrong. Once he was able to learn right from wrong, he should have known and he should have made his own decisions based on that. But when you are born and bred that this is how you act and this is what you do and all this, that, and the third, you kind of have to look at many different things like how he was raised, where he grew up, the fact that his education wasn't the best. And so there were a lot of contributing factors. Ultimately, the biggest factor is Dynamite Kid himself. But I do believe that there was a lot of other factors that went into him turning out the way he did. Not justifying anything he'd done. I'm just saying we kind of have to look at a lot more than just him.
I mean, sure. I mean, that's stuff that could definitely be leading to that result of what's occurred. But I think, as you said, Kevin, he was an adult. He knew right from wrong, and to basically sit there and have that background, everything like that, is one thing, not an excuse. I mean, to put a fucking shotgun to your wife's head, loaded or unloaded, I don't give a fuck. Like, bro, to be honest, put any gun to it doesn't even necessarily have to be your wife's head. If you're putting a gun to someone's fucking head just to scare them, what sort of fucking human being are you? Like, you cannot be mentally all clear and have all your faculties about you. And the interview where he even sat there and he said, well, it wasn't loaded, it was only there to scare her. He came across to me, and I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, but he came across to me who is someone who was mentally missing a few screws. Like, it seemed like he was a couple of stubbies short of a six-pack.
He was trying to justify what he had done.
You can't justify that, though. And when you try, you just sound like an idiot. And that's what he kind of sounded like. You know what I mean? Like, you try and justify it by saying, well, it wasn't fucking loaded, Kev. Like, I don't know, man.
It doesn't matter if it was loaded or not. And I could not agree with you more. If you're going to put a gun to your wife's head, the mother of your children, loaded or unloaded, and then your only retort, you don't say, I'm sorry. You don't say, I know it was wrong. You don't say, I should have never done that. You don't say, it'll never happen again. You say, it wasn't loaded. Yeah. The only thing not loaded in this situation was his fucking brain, because he's clearly missing a few.
Exactly. As I said, a few stubbies short of a full six-pack, mate. And
yeah, well, we're in America, so we use other phrases.
Whatever, mate. But I just think that obviously he was just an abusive person, and he was an angry person, and he definitely seemed like he probably had some sort of mental illness as well, whether that was brought on by the prescription medications and the steroid abuse and whatever else he was pumping into himself. But his mental capacity and his mental intelligence, he did not seem like he was. And granted, this was probably the prior years to him passing, this documentary being recorded, but it just, the whole thing just, it gave me an eerie feeling about him. And like hearing him speak was just eerie and just creepy. Like, even talking about it, the hairs on my arms are starting to stand up on end.
Now, the thing is that and I know you guys see me looking on the side because I was trying to see what kind of pain pills, what kind of drugs he was using after the time, because he was confined to a wheelchair in his 40s. He was having major back issues. He was having a lot. I mean, I've seen matches where he was in Japan. He had this tattoo of a panther on his arm. He was like skinny as fuck. His tights, you hear that word tights? It's supposed to be clinging to your skin. Looked like a pair of slacks because he was so.
Yeah, it said his issue started in 97.
Yeah, and that's the thing, man.
It says in 1997, after having a great deal of complications, he was experiencing trouble walking due to a large number of injuries done to his back and legs he suffered during his career. Billington lost the use of his left leg, relying on a wheelchair for mobility. He was cared for by his second wife, Dot Billington. So about 97 is when he started losing all of his feeling and completely lost use of his left leg. And in 2015, he was named in a lawsuit filed by WWE after the organization received a letter from him indicating that he intended to sue them basically for his injuries.
That would be hard. But again, I mean, WWE should. I mean, the thing is, it's funny how he ended up in the wheelchair. Not funny that way, but due to the fact that his wife was taking care of him. Now that you know how the abuse factor right there is. Now he doesn't have any power to because now he needs somebody to take care of him. He needs somebody to make his meals, give him his meds and stuff like that. Yeah, maybe he was still half cocked and maybe still argued, but now a lot of the power was taken away from him due to the fact of the mobility of his legs, that he can't even move around anymore. So he has to depend on this lady. And like I said, I mean, I've seen pictures of him with these little metal rods coming out of his toes due to his leg injury and stuff. And it's just like he put his body through a lot. And I think WWE should at least at a point take care of him for the things that he's done for the business to make the company what it is today. But, I mean, baseball has pensions. Football has pensions for athletes who played for them. I mean, back in the earlier days, no, but now they do. And I think, I mean, wrestlers who put their life and their body on the line for the sake of the sport and the art, they don't get nothing at the back end to be taken care of just in case their life is, besides the drug program that they have, but there's nothing else to protect them from future injuries. I mean,
so let me ask you guys this before we get too far ahead and I forget. So the Dynamite Kid currently resides in 3 separate Hall of Fames. Do you think the day will ever come where we see him in the WWE Hall of Fame? And if so, do you think he deserves a place in the Hall of Fame? Not only WWE, but the 3 Hall of Fames he's already in, to include the Canadian Wrestling Hall of Fame, the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame, and he is in the Stampede Wrestling Hall of Fame. Stampede Wrestling Class of 95, Wrestling Observer Letter Class of 96, and Canadian Wrestling Hall of Fame Class of 2001.
Yeah, he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, he hasn't done anything crazy. I mean, it's not like a Chris Benoit. I mean, not like a Chris Benoit.
He put a gun to his wife's head.
But the thing is this.
I'm out.
But the thing is, yeah, I understand that. But it's like, I mean, there's a lot of
order.
But I've seen worse. I've seen worse in the business that guys are in the Hall of Fame. I mean, Pat Patterson's in the Hall of Fame. I mean, you got to look at yeah, he stuck a gun to his wife's head, but come on. I mean, you got to go up the ladder. I mean, he has a right to be in the Hall of Fame.
Okay,
look, we're not talking about somebody who stole a pack of gum from Walmart. We're not talking about somebody who jaywalked across the street or got a DUI one time. Which, don't get me wrong, I'm not justifying that. We're talking about somebody who held a gun to his wife's head, who abused his wife and children.
Yeah, but you got to look at, like I said, look at the guys in the Hall of Fame. Snuka.
Put it this way: if he was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 1995 or say even 2000, 2001. Okay, if WWE tried to put him in the Hall of Fame in 2021, their sponsors and everything like that will go, fuck that. Remember the Fabulous Moolah Battle Royal that they were going to do? And then fucking Snickers turned around and was like, hell no, son, we're going to take our chocolate bar money. They were like, and other sponsors were like, fuck that shit. Could you imagine?
And she never hurt anybody. She was just a pimp.
Pimping ain't easy. I'm just saying that's hard.
I don't care what you say about me.
So we got Angel Stotts Pierce. Does Dynamite Kid belong in the WWE Hall of Fame?
No.
Does he belong? Does he belong in the 3 Hall of Fames that he's in?
Yes, and this is why. because they occurred, 20 plus years prior. I just don't think in a day and age of social media and WWE being a public traded company with major sponsorships, that's not if he won't belong in it. I just don't think WWE would put him in the Hall of Fame. The only way that they would do it is if they do it the British Bulldogs as the tag team, and that would be the only way they can do it. And even then, they are flirting with danger.
I don't agree with him being in the Canadian Hall of Fame or the Stampede Hall of Fame. I'm fine with him being in the Wrestler Observer Letter Hall of Fame because the Observer Letter based solely on the matches. It's a documented report of your matches. But the Canadian Wrestling Hall of Fame, the WWE Hall of Fame, Stampede Hall of Fame, it's the person in general, what they did for the business, how they helped the business, how they elevated the business, how they elevated themselves, how they acted as a professional. But just looking at, just looking at the Wrestling Observer Letter, so he was awarded multiple times through Wrestling Observer Letter, leading to his induction into the Hall of Fame in 1996. Awards that include Best Flying Wrestler in 1984, Best Technical Wrestler in 1984, Best Wrestling Maneuver in 1984. So 1984 is a very good year for him. Hardest Worker in 1983, Match of the Year in 1982, Most Underrated in 1983, Most Improved Wrestler 83 and 85, and Tag Team of the Year with Davey Boy Smith in 1985, ultimately leading to his induction into the Hall of Fame in 1996.
Look, he's already in those Hall of Fames. How can you take someone out of him, really?
Well, you know what? If they took off, if we're gonna go that route, then basically you have to take off everybody from the mostly everybody from the WWE Hall of Fame, because I'm looking at things like from abuse to the Tammy's, everything. There's just a lot of things, and again, it depends on the situation. From drug abuse to child abuse to Pat Patterson stories, there's gonna be a lot of people removed.
I might get a little bit of heat for this, but I think there's a line in the sand when it comes to who should and should not be in the Hall of Fame. And where I think that line is drawn, so you draw the line, and on one side you have who does get in, and on the other side you have who don't get in. Obviously, model wrestlers like The Rock, like John Cena, guys that you really don't have too many issues with, obviously they're going into the Hall of Fame. Yeah. Now, when you start to look at drug abuse and alcohol abuse, but never really hurt anybody, other than themselves, Hall of Fame. But when you look at the Pat Pattersons, okay?
The Snookers.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But I want to focus more on the Pat Patterson, because what did Pat Patterson do? He abused
his power.
Minors. He abused minors. Whether it be sexual abuse, whether it be full-on rape, who cares? It's still a form of abuse. So we're saying no. Dynamite Kid abused wife and children. Granted, he wasn't knocking on the back door of his son, but still, it was a form of abuse. Whenever you abuse a child, I've always said this. I said the two worst things you, as a man, as a father, and as a husband, the two worst things you could be in life is a woman beater and a child abuser of any kind, whether it be, physical, mental, whether it be molestation, whatever. A woman beater and a child abuser of any kind. So once you flirt with that abusing women and children as a man, I'm going to say no every time. And I understand we got to take a look into the Hall of Fame, and maybe that's another episode of Wrestling with Tragedy. We run down the Hall of Fame and give our thoughts on who should and who shouldn't be in there. And we can have a good debate on it. But I believe whenever you flirt with the line of abusing women and children, the answer for me is going to be no every single time. And I'm willing to smack the gavel on that one, boys.
I just think if you take away the people in the Hall of Fame, and subtract the people that were abusive or drug, whatever, you're going to have only 10 people in the Hall of Fame. You know what I mean? It's going to be a real small amount of people in there.
But Vince did it to himself. He did that to himself by making the restrictions so okay, the elephant in the room, Chris Benoit, he'll never be in the Hall of Fame. Why?
Yeah.
Because whenever you Google Chris Benoit, the only thing you're going to see is the last 72 hours of that man's life. Vince said, fuck no. Take Woman. Okay, Woman was a victim. She had nothing to do with it aside from the fact that she was a victim.
Will never be in the Hall of Fame.
When you Google Woman, all you're going to see is the last 2 hours or last 72 hours of her life because she was a victim. She had nothing to do with any of that. She was an innocent person who did a lot for valets, who owned her craft, who performed it very well. I believe deserves a spot in the Hall of Fame, but Vince will never put her in there
because of that connection.
Vince did this shit to himself.
But do you think, like, you know, obviously now, like, Tom Billington Dynamite Kid will never be in the Hall of Fame.
I think the British Bulldogs will be.
Yeah, look, I think the British Bulldogs will be. Look, they even said that China was never going to be in the Hall of Fame, and she was. You know what I mean? Like, I think it just depends on the angle, the way they play it. But to be honest, with all the information out on Dynamite Kid, I would be very surprised if he gets inducted in the Hall of Fame.
And I think the reason that, and again, I'm just going off from the time, but I think the reason why Vince doesn't want Chris Benoit, besides the situation that happened, is when that shit happened, he went like on TV and said, "Oh, you know, we lost one." You know, he did like the memorial thing, and then when he found out the truth, instead of waiting to find out what happened, he had to retract his statement, and he was pissed because he doesn't like to be put on the spot like that. And that even gave him more of an incentive to be like, he will never, even if he was not, it's definitely put him more of a nail in the coffin that he would never be in the Hall of Fame, because Vince had to go back on TV and say, hey, we were wrong. We didn't know the whole story. He wants to be aware of everything before he goes on TV and puts himself out there. So he
would have learned a massive lesson from that. You know what I
mean? Yeah, that's why he's like, fuck that. You know, I'm not doing that again. Because he was hot if you saw when he made that statement. Not hot because of the situation, but also hot because he was embarrassed. Because he was not aware, he was not put in the know.
Yeah.
Kind of, sort of.
Well, it's not even that he wasn't put in the know. It was just more information from the investigation came out, what the cause of the death was for, you know, the family and Benoit. But
no. But Vince is a person that needs to control his own environment. He has to be in control. And when that thing was not in his control and he just went off the gun and just said what he said, that pissed him off, because then he's like, shit, fuck. I should have did my research. You know what I mean? Like, it put him on the spot. You know?
No, I agree. I definitely agree. But yeah, I mean, moving on to final comments on Dynamite Kid. Kevin, what are your final thoughts?
My final thoughts are that, like I previously stated, as a man, the two worst things you could be is a woman beater and a child abuser of any kind. He fits both those categories. I'm sorry that, or I'm not sorry, but I wish his life would have ended better. I wish he would have been able to make amends with his children, or at least be able to have some kind of relationship, because from 91 until 2018, he never seen his kids, or at least those three. And I couldn't imagine living one day without seeing my children. I really couldn't. I feel bad that he died in a wheelchair, but that's the risk you run as a pro wrestler. You know what you're doing to your body. It's been scientifically proven that one wrestling match is damn near the equivalent of being in a car accident. Angel can speak to that more than anybody, and he's actually wrestled New Jack, so it's probably more like a semi-accident and not just a car accident.
I'm always hurting, yeah.
But my final thoughts on Dynamite Kid are, he did great things for wrestling. I wish he would have been a better person, and I think his only way into the Hall of Fame is through the British Bulldogs, and even then, I hope the Bulldogs never get to the Hall of Fame and just Davey Boy Smith gets his own.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. Angel, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, like I said, I don't take away the Dynamite Kid's ability as a professional wrestler. I think he's a phenomenal wrestler. He was one of my idols and still is as a kid. It's just like Superman is. You know, I mean, it's just, he was a great athlete and he made this business what it is today. Yeah, his personal life was the drizzling shits. The guy was a fucking dick. He treated everybody all fucked up. He thought he was Billy Badass. I feel bad for what happened to his wife in regards to shotgun incident that he couldn't see his kids. But again, that's protecting the kids from an abusive parent. So fuck him. He doesn't deserve to see his kids because he didn't earn the right to see them because of the way he treated the family. Now, to be in the Hall of Fame, yeah, you're right. The British Bulldogs might get into the WWE Hall of Fame because of what they accomplished in the WWF at the time. You know, I'm torn in between if he should be in there or not because, again, I mean, I don't know, man. Like I said, I'm on the fence. It is what it is. I'm on the fence. I need a little more meat on it to say, you know what, fuck him. But right now, I think he does deserve it. Would he get in there? Nah, I doubt it. You know. But British Bulldog would be in there before him. I just think that if he would have just took accountability of his actions and just try to change his life a little bit better, things would have been different for him. He would have probably been in the office. He would have probably been a producer. He would have probably had more money in his pocket. I mean, there was a lot of possibilities if he would have just changed certain things in his life. But again, wishful thinking, you know, it is, you know, tomato. You can't change the past. But anyway, to Pierce, what is your final thoughts?
My final thoughts on it is, you know, he was a small guy. He did a lot of great things for that cruiserweight style for the smaller guys in professional wrestling. You know, he got on the gas to try and get himself bigger because, you know, obviously back then it was a big man's game. Injuries started piling up. He started taking, you know, pain medication to sort of mask the pain so he could keep on going. Hence putting his body in more and more distress and more aggravation over years of doing it. As far as him as a human being and hearing what his ex-wife had to say about him and the actions that he did, look, I don't want to speak ill of the dead. He was a piece of shit. You know, his actions were that of a man that had no care for anyone but himself, clearly. To put his wife and his children in that sort of situation is disgusting on a human level. The fact that he didn't have a relationship with his children makes me sad because, you know, obviously I think that as a parent, I wouldn't want to go a day without seeing my two children. And to be able to go through that and just so, yeah, I'm going to hop on a plane and fuck off. Like, I don't know, man. Look, to me, that it all points towards he's a piece of shit. How he acted to guys in the back, trying to be, you know, Billy Badass, and even trying to do that shit with his wife, man. You know, it's a shitty. The whole thing is a shitty story, and it's a shitty thing that his ex-wife had to go through, and their children had to go through, and to drive her to that thought and that place of going where she was almost going to go, man. It's heartbreaking, man, hearing that story, even though it's years prior. But that's my final thoughts on it, guys. So I'm going to fling it over to Kevin to bring us home.
Before you fling it to Kevin, you know what's my final thoughts? If you were on the gas, Pierce, with that beard, you would look like one of those characters from Warhammer, man. You would have been a jacked little dwarf with a giant mallet, just decimating the orgs and shit. You know, I could see you doing that if you were on the gas.
Cool story, Angel. Kevin?
I hate you.
So, ladies and gentlemen,
lover.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching Wrestling with Tragedy. Thank you for tuning in every week. A quick shout out to our three major sponsors, first of which none of this would be possible without Vince Russo and putting us on the Vince Russo network. So thank you, Vince, for that. Make sure you guys are going to youtube.com, type in the Vince Russo network, give Wrestling with Tragedy a thumbs up, give it a comment, give it a like, and let Vince Russo know that we come with a very strong and loyal fan base. Also to My Own Belts and A-Rock Designs, thank you so much for starting, or not for starting, but thank you for sponsoring the show. If you guys are in the mood to start your belt collection, add to your belt collection, or pick up any custom merchandise like the cup that Piers is drinking out of, hit us up. We can put you in contact with all of the right people to talk to. And guys, if you have anything that you want us to cover in the world of professional wrestling, hit us up on all facets of social media, whether it be Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. All you have to do is type in Wrestling with Tragedy, look for this logo, send us a message, and we'll be more than happy to get back to you and cover the topics that you want to see us cover. With that being said, guys.
Oh, wait. And also, if you want to know what Pierce is drinking, we want to thank our other sponsor, Outback Whiskey. And
you're a fucking asshole.
Kevin, take it away, Kev.
With that being said, for myself, for Piers, for Angel, for the Vince Russo Network, thank you for watching. We'll see you next week. In this case, gentlemen, is adjourned.